I feel like we've been trained to just be so divided and to look for the enemy that we've lost that capacity. And so many people don't have that curiosity and wonder.
Mm.
Because I believe that if if we were in the other person's shoes and had experienced every single thing that they had experienced up until that point, we would be in the exact same position. Like
Yeah.
there's a reason why they're there.
Yeah.
Um, we're just so attached to making things good or bad all the time.
Yeah. Hello and welcome back to episode 6 of A Woman Refined. I'm your host, as always, Lauren Renee. And this month on the podcast, we have a very good friend of mine who I've known for nearly 15 years. Her name is Aimee Q. Devlin. And Aimee is actually the first person to introduce to me the concept of feminine, not feminist, probably about 7 years ago now. So I thought it was about time I got her on the podcast for her to explain herself, how she came up with this concept, where she first heard it, how it affected her life. And we go deep discussing all of the propaganda and the matrix systems that have been running through our society and culture for the last decade or so, or even longer. So if you like this episode, please like, share, comment, subscribe, do all of those clicky internet things. And if you want to contact Aimee, she has also her own podcast, My Mama Summer, which is a spin-off of her Substack, My Mama Summer. So check her out over there. Otherwise, sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 6. And I'll see you next month. Aimee, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm excited too. You and I have known each other for a really long time. I think it's 15 years next year.
Wow. Yeah, it probably is.
Yeah.
It's a long while and a lot has happened
A
since then.
lot. We were involved in a lot together in the early days. I know that like a lot of people got into like the COVID activism stuff, but you and I were doing that before COVID was a thing. We were like rallying the troops. We were hardcore hippies. We were doing some crazy stuff. And yet
And
we've both
by the time the whole COVID thing came along, we were done with that.
exactly. We're like, oh, we've
Mostly.
we've been here, seen that before. It's
Yeah.
like the 8/11 thing that just passed, where I had so many people messaging me, "Hey, what do you think's going to happen?" I was like, "Oh, I've lived through so many of these. Nothing's going to happen."
Just
They've
go
been,
live your life, enjoy
yeah,
yourself.
it's fine. It's fine. They've been saying this for a very long time. Nothing happens
Yeah.
ever. But yeah, we both settled in our old age, quote unquote.
Yeah, totally.
But the reason I wanted to have you on is because you do some really interesting stuff now. You have your own podcast.
I do. I do.
Yes. And you were the first person who ever introduced the concept of feminine, not feminist to me. You sent it to me in a message because I think I sent you something on Instagram and you just replied with that one line. And my brain discombobulated. I was like, what do you mean? This-
Aren't
what?
they the same thing?
Yeah, it was very like, what? And you were the first person who literally got me starting to think about this kind of stuff. And I think that was close to 7 years ago now, maybe 6.
Yeah, it was probably, was it around 2016, 2017-ish?
I think 2018, 2017,
Okay.
2018. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
remember, what got you into all that kind of stuff? Like how did this stumble upon you?
Well, I have never considered myself a feminist. Like I've never been in that world, but I'm also someone who doesn't get labels and attach them to myself. Like, I've done that a little bit, like I used to be a vegan, that type of stuff, but
Yeah.
I've never been into the whole like labeling thing, mostly because I find that labels tend to come together in a box and I might be one of them, but not the
Mm,
other one. And
hmm.
so it's really quite challenging usually to put me in one of those boxes or to like have one of those labels because people are like, well, you need to have all these other labels with that label. That's just how it works. And
Mm,
so feminism is one of those things, but it just wasn't, it wasn't something I grew up with. It wasn't something that I studied or anything like that. But in about, I think it was 2016, 2017, I was in a place where I was really seeking sisterhood and like close female friendships. And I joined an online women's circle.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, this is the thing. Like, this is gonna like bring me all the sisterhood. And I was kind of a little bit in the kind of new agey realm then, where it's like the divine this and all that kind of stuff. Like, I was intrigued by those terms and stuff. So I joined this online women's circle, and the founder was a woman who I'd heard of before and I'd seen before, and she was in like the health kind of world. I don't really want to name her because I don't know what she's doing these days, and she
Yeah, fair
kind of
enough.
turned from being like this really beautiful, grounded, feminine woman. And even in the space that I was in this women's circle, which was not very long, it was probably like 3 months, because I paid for that amount of time. Um, by the end of it, she was just very masculine. She chopped off all her hair. She had like rings all over her face. And she considered herself to be like strong and empowered and all these kind of things that you see the feminist kind of people
Mm-hmm.
doing. And yeah, so being inside of that women's circle was my introduction to the world of modern feminism. I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't seen it, heard it, or anything before. And it was also my introduction to the woke world,
Mm.
all of that stuff, because the majority of the women in this circle were from Canada and the United States. And I was the only I was an outlier. I was from Australia. There was one woman who was from, like, I think Denmark, and another lady from Europe, somewhere else. And we were kind of less, like, the other people who weren't from the States or
Yeah.
North America were kind of looking in going, there's something not right here. But all the other women were solid in their beliefs and their ideology and what they were doing. And it
Mm.
was just like a pack of wolves, not sisterhood.
Sounds scary.
It was, but it was beautiful because it was my introduction to that world. And it was also my, um, yeah, it sent me down that rabbit hole of like, okay, what the hell is going on here? What is happening around me? Because as you know, you've been in that world a while. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot have a rational discussion with one of these people. They just have no capacity
Mm.
to see outside of their realm and no willingness.
Mm.
It's just not there. Like, you can't do it.
So where did you go from there? What kind of shifted? You're in this women's circle, you finish up, you're like, this woman's got some stuff going on. Let's be kind with our words. She's got some stuff going on. You come out of that. How did you kind of get into this whole understanding that there's a difference between the feminine and the feminist?
I think so. What I did during my time in that group was I just used it as a springboard and a learning adventure, instead of like, oh, this is where I'm going to find all my close feminine friends. I was like, immediately realized that was not happening.
Yeah.
And with being the person that I am, I took an observer view and was
Mm.
just writing like there was no tomorrow. Like, okay, what's going on here? Like, oh, they see it this way, I see it that way. Like, it was just an endless stream of observance. Like,
What I
and
would
so
give to get my hands on that writing right now. I can
and I
imagine it would
think
be
I
so
have,
good.
like, I have some of it somewhere. Like, I know because there's a lot of it.
It's
Like,
a book in the making right there.
there's a lot there. And every night, it was really interesting because it was hosted in a Facebook group,
Hmm.
right? So, um, and I was paying to be in this group. So part of me was like, well, I'm gonna like show up and
Mm.
get my money's worth.
Yeah, of
And I
course.
did, like, I just not in the way that I expected. And Brendan and I used to spend our nights at that time, like, just dismantling this programming of like, what is going on here? I'd come to him and we'd have these big long chats about, well, what's this? Because he's got that brain where he understands all the
Mm.
labels and
Mm.
he can see the kind of more archetypal stuff, and he's
Yes.
got that type of brain. And I'm kind of more of a literal, whatever is happening, it's right in front of me. Like I see what's there. So
Mm.
together we would come like meet at nighttime, have a
Yep.
cup of tea, and just talk about what we saw inside of this group. And I'd show him the conversations and stuff because I was a huge outlier and
Yeah.
everyone was coming at me. Like it was a very interesting feeling because I knew I wasn't the crazy one.
Mm.
All of these women were nuts, like
Yeah.
like with what they were saying, and yet I was the only one who had that kind of these ideas of like, okay, I thought at some point I kept saying to him, am I going crazy? I mean, I know I'm right here, right? Like, I'm not stupid. And
Yeah.
he'd be like, no, it's all good. Like, it's not you. This is what's going on.
Yeah.
And then I would just sort of be like, okay, cool. All right. So it's not me. Because
That,
when you're in that world, it can be really like it can get into your psyche when there's
yeah.
so many other people who think that same way, right? And you're the only one going,
Yep.
hmm,
It's that pack mentality, that hive
yeah,
mindset, and you're the disruptor coming in saying, hey, I think differently. And that's a threat. That's actually a threat to social cohesion, which just kicks up all their primal instincts. And they're like, we got to take out the threat. And we've got to band together
yeah,
to take out the threat. Even if there's something in them that kind of agrees with you, they have to look at, okay, 1 versus maybe 15. Where am I safer? So even if they agree with you, they're not going to go along with you because it's actually safer for them to stay quiet and push down that feeling that's like, this isn't right. And we saw that
yeah.
with COVID, we saw that on a mass scale. That you got to experience that in the mini version
Mini
quite
version.
early on.
I'd yeah, I had that already. I had that experience already before it came.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because I went down the rabbit hole of all the different kind of things like cultural Marxism
Mm.
and critical theory and all of these things that are happening now that have got
Mm.
even more,
Yes.
in your face.
Mm.
And I did have like I dropped those kind of words in a few of the conversations because I thought I'm not leaving here without like planting some seeds.
Good for you.
And I did have a couple of women like message me privately
Mm.
and say, "What do you mean by this? Like what does that mean?" And they were the women from Europe because they
Mm.
were like, I sense that this isn't right too, but I don't want to say anything in the group kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So,
You've always been brave. Like that is something, that's a word I would associate with you, actually, from
okay.
knowing you from the beginning. Not from the beginning, but knowing you for many years. I would say that, yeah, you've never been afraid to kind of be that voice of dissension. I would say that the group of us that kind of banded together 15 years ago were all those types of people.
Yeah.
um, which is kind of probably why we're all still friends now, because we've all had varying degrees of opinions that have evolved and shaped over the years that have been similar and yet then different from each other as we grew. And we all still stayed friends through that. We all kind of accepted, okay, you're on your journey. That's where you're at. We were all raw vegan at some point.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, our immune systems. But we all kind of, at different stages kind of came out of that. And then we had the whole community. We had a community that we'd built behind us. And so we'd had these micro experiences of being outsiders. And I know for myself, like being like on the vaccine advocacy train before all of the COVID vaccines for the childhood schedule when I didn't even have children. Um, so I knew what that was like already. You knew what this was like already. So then all this big stuff comes along and it's kind of like, okay, we're like almost soldiers on the front line who've been training for years for this kind of stuff. Um,
Mm,
how did you find, like now when you're looking at the state of the world, right? And I know that's a big question, but when you're looking at the state of the world, and particularly women, and how we're going to raise a future generation of women, when you're looking back at those moments where you saw that woman shift,
mm.
where she
Yeah.
was soft and then she went hard, what what do you think A was happening for it and B could have stopped that? That's my curiosity. And I'm not saying that you would have the answers, but out of curiosity, I don't know if I could stop someone or help someone. I think only they can do what they want to do when they're open to
Mm.
doing it, for sure. But when it's a mass thing, I wonder what the thing is that's going to like be the wrench in the cog.
I mean, I can't speak specifically for her,
Mm,
but my sense of it is that people like that are usually people who don't have a strong internal sense of self.
yeah.
They're people who are so easily swayed by external opinions, external ideologies, other people's beliefs, crowd think, like all of this stuff coming at them. And it's way more easier to take that on and be like, I'm going to test that for a while. That's going to be part of my identity, right? And I'll be
Mm,
in with this crowd. Than it is to check in with your internal self and go, now that's bullshit. I'm
mm,
not doing that.
mm,
And I think the programming that specifically in relation to that woman, there's some really what I perceive to be toxic traits with the whole feminist thing in relation to like she was very like she had an ex-boyfriend who she was coming out and saying, oh, he raped me and this happened. And it's like, and I'll probably get, whoever's watching this, you know, may drag me over the coals for saying this, but I'm going to just say it. It's like, I think that a certain percentage of women say that stuff that, and it's not really true. It's
mm.
like, it's not that they're lying, like they've actually been raped and they lied about it, but there's like, there's a bit of they're stretching the truth. It's like, well, maybe something happened and then you changed your mind about it like 10 years later and you've looked back and gone, yeah, he raped me. Like in
Yeah,
the
that
moment, did you believe that? Or
there
is
is.
it just now because you've got this programming that
Mm.
tells you that no, if you didn't do this, then it was rape.
Yeah, it's a bit like how they've kind of expanded the definition of like ADHD to encompass a whole lot more. So everyone's ADHD. The definition of sexual assault and rape has expanded so much that it would be like almost most people would have been considered to have been sexually
Yeah,
assaulted now that we have that understanding of what that is. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's not true, but then when you're then looking back and you're looking for things to put in, you go, oh, that actually lines up with that definition, even though the feeling might not have been there or the intention might not have been there and things were different back then. There will be some genuine cases, of course,
yeah,
but I understand what you're saying. The definition is so broad now that I know that there's a bunch of men that are coming up in this generation that are deathly afraid to speak to women because they're afraid that they will be considered to be harassing them. They don't
yeah,
approach women that they find attractive. They don't ask women out. It's terrifying because they don't want to be seen to be harassing. They don't want to seem to be sexually assaulting if they tap someone on the shoulder. And so our society is going to collapse because we're going to have this whole thing where we're afraid to do anything for fear of getting it wrong because there's
yeah,
this overarching definitions that will legally now encompass everybody's personal human interaction for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. And I saw that inside of the programming in these women
Mm,
in this group because it was, and I'm not over exaggerating here, like some women took it. It was like if a guy looked at them
mm,
from across the street and smiled and said hi,
mm,
that was a personal attack on their body. And
mm,
I could see how they could make that
mm,
into rape. Like
mm,
it was that just extreme. And I thought that helped me go, all right, well, wow, this is pretty crazy. Like what you're able to turn your brain into, like what
mm,
you're able to see to make happen that's not really happening
mm,
in just tiny, tiny ways. And if you bring that, like if you're doing that all the time, you can really get out of touch with reality and what's truly happening. And I
mm.
saw that, recently you shared that Sarah Wilson post where this guy called Tony Baker put up a quote asking like, "Hey fellas, what do you love about women? Can you
Yes.
just let me know in the comments aside from like their beauty and sexual stuff? What do you
Yes.
love about women?" And it was 7,000 comments of just the most beautiful things. Like
Mm,
was actually in tears reading it in the kitchen to
Yeah.
Brendan in the morning. He was making my breakfast, God forbid,
I know.
while I was reading this post for him. And I started crying because I was like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. Like 7,000 different little ways that
Mm.
men love women. It was really heartwarming for me. And then, douche, all the feminists on Sarah Wilson's post just took it so out of context. And actually, Brennan and I filmed a podcast about this that'll
Mm.
come out soon because we were just like, this is obscene. Like, how can feminists take this so out of context?
Yes.
And it was a really beautiful expose of their programming and what they see, like how they twist everything. It's like, take it in, and then bleh, out
Yeah.
comes madness.
So you're committed to finding the worst in everyone. It's like whatever you experience in the world, you're just committed to finding the worst version of that. Instead of giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, you just doubt everybody.
Totally.
Crazy.
Totally.
What a way to live
Well,
your life.
that's what we've been programmed to do. That's
Mm.
what critical theory is.
Mm.
It's a theory that's designed to have you look at other people and see what's different and to criticize the other.
Yeah.
And then that just continues to be criticized and criticized into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller pieces where everyone's just criticizing each other and the whole of society just falls apart.
Yeah.
What do you see when you look around you at the moment?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, you can't say anything because you're a white man and you're heterosexual and this thing and that thing. And it's like, you know, Brendan and I had a joke about this in our podcast about how, you know, it's like, well, you know, you can take it so far. I mean, how far do you take that?
Mm.
Like, well, am I being oppressed because I'm left-handed and a cake fork comes on the other side? Like, what,
Yeah.
you know, is that oppression? And he's like, you know, do you have to be an amputee to not be like, how far do you go with this?
I
How
actually
far?
have a privilege in my life, Aimee, and it's that I don't like sweet things, that I'm a savory person. And it is a privilege. That's why I'm not obese. And so I have to
Yeah,
acknowledge that on the podcast here that, that is
check your
my
privilege.
privilege. Yeah, my sweetness privilege.
You can say anything,
Yeah,
right?
it's
It's like,
ridiculous.
but why would you do that?
Yeah.
Why? Why would you choose that? You're
Yeah.
choosing that.
I think people just don't have enough going on in their real life with real life problems that you have to try and find something that makes you special and that makes you a victim. So then you can also not take responsibility for things. Like our generation really grew up with the whole you can be anything, which is wild that our parents were like, yeah, you can be whatever you want to be. Whatever you want to be, you can do that. And so I think a whole bunch of kids took that on. They're like, cool, I can have whatever I want. I can do whatever I want. We weren't really disciplined as hard as, I mean, I was, but for a lot of people, they weren't disciplined as hard as like the previous generations. Um, so I think there's this idea in the mindset of this generation that you're very special. Like I would imagine a lot of people's parents told them, you're so special. You're a special, unique little flower. And when you go out into the real world and you realize that everybody is this special, unique flower, your specialness dies a little bit. And you're like, I want that specialness back. I want that feeling back. And so you got to create it. You have to create it
Yeah.
somehow. So you look for differentiations. Like, here I am. I've got this a little bit different. So that makes me a little bit special. And someone else will go, well, that's not really that special because I have that too. Or my cousin's neighbor down the road also has that. And you're like, well, I have it worse. Yeah. So now you've turned your specialness into a handicap, a victimhood. So now no one can say anything because if they are, they're not being sensitive to your specialness. And it's a poison. It's a poison in the society, a poison in your mind.
Yes. And I think in the generations under us, like
Mm.
my niece, so what's that? I don't even know what generations. I don't really know the
Alpha.
generations underneath us. So she'd be like 20 now.
Okay, she's
Is
Gen
that
Z.
okay? So Gen Z, right? So
Yeah.
it's got at some. This is a while ago. She was having ideas about, well, am I a girl, like, or do I want to be a boy, kind of thing.
Mm.
And her mum called me and spoke to me because she knew that I had outspoken beliefs
Mm.
about this. And she's in the UK, and in the UK, they just kind of like get your kid aside and kind of say, well, oh, well, we can take you here and you can do all this stuff. And she was like, she was like, the mum was
Yeah.
like, hang on a minute, hold up, like let's just take a
Mm.
breath here
Yeah.
and call Aimee. And
Yeah.
so we had a big chat about this, and after a little while, we spoke with her,
Mm.
and it turned out that that was kind of the crux of it, is that it's been so, like, kids feel so normal these days, like that they have to choose something special
Mm.
to kind of be, to stand out. It's
Yeah.
like it's gone to that extent where it's not like you know, have some purple socks to stand out. No, you change your gender to
Yeah.
stand out. It's like
Yeah.
that's so obviously, you know, we she saw what was happening in the
Mm.
programming and all that kind of stuff, and didn't move ahead with that, and she realized that that was really silly, and she shouldn't be doing that, and she's actually a girl and all that kind of stuff. But
Mm.
it was scary for a little while of
Yeah.
this, but it's even more scary because like the NHS and like
Yeah.
they just push it. The schools, it's
Yes.
like, oh yeah, well, you know, instead of saying, well, hang on, this is, you've got something going on mentally, like let's
Yeah.
work with that. What's going on? Are you being bullied? Do you feel heard? Like, what's going on for you? It's just like, oh, okay, we'll take it at face value and now we'll do
Mm.
this.
It's a natural process, I think, for teenagers to feel uncomfortable in their bodies. They literally have to have this process of like ritual initiation, which we don't do anymore, where they have to die. The child has to die and then they have to become an adult. They are reborn as an adult. And so when we're not walking them through this process, like, hey, it's really normal to feel uncomfortable. Your entire body is changing, your brain is changing, your hormones are like sending you crazy right now. We all went through this. We all felt like we didn't fit, we didn't belong. Everybody feels weird and awkward at this time in life. And that was generally accepted to be the teenager's journey in the previous generations, for my generation and before. But now it's kind of like any of that uncomfortableness that happens, we've kind of forgotten. Oh, that's normal. That's actually how teenagers are meant to be. And that's a requirement for them to grow into the adult. And with things that become available, like transition teams in schools, suicide pods, all these things that where those feelings become overwhelming and you don't have something to ground you, like a family bond because you've been sent out to daycare and school and you have actually peer bonded with your friends and you don't have a family bond, so you have nowhere to come back to ground yourself into reality. It's scary. It's a scary time that these things are going to take over, and children, they really do have such young minds still. I mean, they don't stop developing until they're 24. For them to be making huge decisions like that without understanding, with no one going, hey, yeah, that's really, I get that you feel uncomfortable in your body. That's normal. It doesn't mean you're a dude, though. It just means
Yeah.
you're uncomfortable in your body. And
Yeah.
that's okay. Like, how did we go from not normalizing tomboys or like, you know,
That was me.
effeminate men? You know, they were there, and then some of them grew out of it, and some of them didn't, and it was totally fine and it was normal. But no one was like, "Oh, you're actually entirely wrong. How you are and what you're experiencing is wrong, and you need to be something else." Like that to me is so wild because the other side is saying we're so tolerant. We're accepting who they are. We're actually accepting the real them. And I'm like, actually, the real them is just someone who is very uncomfortable in what they're experiencing. And it would be more compassionate, actually, to acknowledge that and to help them along in that journey rather than redefining them as something
Mm,
completely different and telling them that that's reality. That's not compassionate. That's abusive, really. So I'm
yeah.
so glad that you, I mean, whoa, microphone went flying. Everyone needs a, excuse me about that. I was just about to say, so lucky everyone needs an Auntie Aimee in their life to call because what if they don't, you know? And then they
Yeah.
go and do some things that are really irreparable, like
Mm,
the puberty blockers or make you infertile. And they're not told that. You know, the gender reassignment surgeries are insane, the damage that it does to the body long term. It actually reduces um their years, their life expectancy is what the word I'm looking for
yeah.
because of all the damage. Like it's insane that these people are taking this temporary moment that almost all of us experience. And all these
Mm.
adults are supposed to be in the room, who are supposed to be in charge, who are supposed to be like, I went through that. It's okay. I get it. I understand. Or at least someone I know went through that. Um,
Yeah.
but the adults are in the room are dropping the ball and they're encouraging this. That's what I find is wild, is the encouragement from other people. And I think there is that sense of like, wanting to be part of the group, wanting to be, oh, like everybody's doing it. So I may as well, I can't speak out. I can't say this is weird or this is wrong or this doesn't seem right because then I'll be transphobic or homophobic or whatever. There's all these things that you get labeled as now. And the
It's
definitions are
all
so broad.
it's almost as blasé as like getting a tattoo or something these days.
Yes.
It's like because if you don't have a tattoo, you are the minority these days in our
Yes.
kind of generation. I don't know about the next generations, but that's kind of the message that I was receiving from her was that, well, how can I be special if I don't do like if you don't do something that extreme, you're the outsider. That's kind of how the reality of her situation was. It was like, I was like, what, are you kidding me?
I think as well, because everybody used to know an extreme person in their community, but now we're all online and all the most extreme people get the most algorithm. So you're seeing a level of
Mm,
extremeness that you never would have saw before. So you wanting to do something crazy. Like I remember cutting off all my hair in year 11. Like I was like, I want to have short hair. Oh,
yes,
because
you
I
can
put my
speak
hand
now,
up.
Lauren.
Oh my God. For those listening, I raised my hand and Zoom was like, oh, Lauren wants to speak. Um, yeah, I cut all my hair off and it was like, whoa, Lauren cut all her hair off. And I mean, it looked hideous and I had braces and it was just so awkward. But, I didn't know anyone who cut off all their hair and I felt like, yeah, I'm pretty like out there. I'm doing something pretty risky. But now these kids these days see so much extreme online that anything that they could think of to do that might have been considered extreme in
Mm,
our day is not extreme. So they're going to have to, I'm not cutting off my hair anymore. I'm going to cut off other parts of my body. That's extreme, you
yeah,
know?
how far can we take this?
Yeah, it's wild. It's
That's a
wild.
really good point. That's a really, really good point that you can find anything these days. I mean, for instance, like in that situation for someone who wants to turn into a boy, they have to find like a binder to bind
Mm,
their boobs so that they're
yeah.
flat. And so you have to find somewhere to buy that. And so there's like these secret groups and stuff and like places that you can kind of connect into to
Mm,
figure that out and learn how to do it and where to buy the thing and all that. And that's all happening in secret
yeah.
behind the parents' backs. It's like there's all these little groups of places where you can get all the information
Mm,
and feel like you're part of the group and that it's like way more popular than it actually is
yeah.
and way more normal than it actually is. And that's really scary.
Yeah, and it gives you an echo chamber for someone,
Mm,
like I was saying before about um the definitions being so wide for these women. You go into those groups and someone will be like, oh, my mum was kind of questioning if maybe I have something else going on. Oh, that's someone who's not a part of your journey. You should cut them out. I'm your new family now. It gets really extreme because the definitions of abuse and the reasons that you should cut people out are so broad when actually people are your mom's just scared and worried about you and doesn't know what to and wants to have a conversation and doesn't really know. I'm sure there are abusive parents out there. But not everyone is. And they're kind of
yeah.
sold a message that you have to disassociate because they will never understand, that who's that? There's a YouTuber, TikToker guy who kind of wants to talk to the children. I think Jeffrey someone and he wants to talk to
Mm.
the children and he's like, I can be your new family. If your family doesnn't understand, I just message me and I'll be your new family. I'm like, oh, you are a predator,
Oh,
sir. Ooh,
that's not creepy at
this,
all.
yeah, it's
Jeff.
scary though. Yeah. Very, 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 very scary because kids feel lost. And if they don't have a good family bond, which is hard to do these days with both parents working and all that kind of stuff, and half the kids being online. all the time.
Yeah.
There's no family time anymore. Where's your family game board game nights? There's that stuff just doesn't happen anymore. So I mean, I'm sure it does somewhere, but as a norm, it's not a norm anymore. People are on their iPads, the kids are in the room all the time, and so
Mm.
you're looking for some kind of connection because that's normal as
Yeah.
teenagers to feel disconnected. Yeah, scary stuff. So okay, so weaving back to the woman.
Yeah. Let's go back to the women.
Do you reckon that there's anything that could have put like the things that you were saying, obviously for some women changed things, which I think is important. So someone speaking up definitely would be one of those things. But do you reckon
Yeah.
there's anything that could have turned the whole group around?
Um, Interesting. Do I think there's anything that could have turned the group around? I mean, it was like a spectrum of there was like super extreme women who were influencing the less extreme women who
Mm.
then influenced those kind of thing. And so, and then there was me. And so it was
Yeah.
like, heavily balanced heavily over this side, and then like one little person going, well, how about
Yes.
this? And so um if you took out the really extreme ones,
Mm.
I think like there's a few that come to mind of
Mm.
of women. Like I still remember them. I still remember the conversations. It's like so
Mm.
vivid because I was like, what the hell am I witnessing here?
Yeah.
Uh if you took those most extreme kind of versions out, I think my influence would have been a lot better.
Mm.
And
So
I
just
think the reason for that is because these women didn't have a strong sense of self.
yeah.
Like, and that's the problem.
So
Like this, they were
they would
so able to. You go.
no, I was going to say that's why some people on the left would say representation is important, Aimee, and we must
Oh,
be
okay.
represented so we can hear all views.
um, yeah, it's because what was happening in these conversations was like I could tell that someone had read a book on like let's say for instance the woman who was leading the group
Mm.
had read some kind of book on privilege,
Mm.
right? And it was like that was her lens
Mm.
in that moment. And if everyone has to read that book, and like everything she got was from that one book,
Mm.
and there was no other like it's like a vegan, right? Like
Mm.
I used to be like that. I know what it's like to believe you're right and like
Yes.
everyone else is wrong. Like I've been there, it's all good. I know what that's like.
Mm.
Um, but I could see that when she would come in and she'd be like, she'd use all these words and like, to sound fancy and that kind of stuff. And then the other woman would kind of come back who didn't have a strong sense of self, but didn't believe that.
Mm.
So it's like they didn't believe it, but they didn't have a strong sense of self. They would take that information in and go, oh, yeah, okay. All right, well, I'll believe that now.
Mm.
Instead of going, hang on a minute, does that sound right? What else can I learn about this to kind of round out my thinking?
Mm.
They would just take on that programming from the extreme.
Do you think that the not strong sense of self comes from a low sense of worth? So the way that I heard that then was a woman going, I don't know as much as her. I'm not as smart as her. I'm never going to find out as much as her because I would be like, I'm just going to go read and find out for myself. Um, but there are women who are like, oh, I could never understand that. I could never, so then they attach, which to me just sounds like such low self-worth. Like you are not smart enough. You are not clever enough. You can't possibly know as much as this person who is an quote unquote authority, which is really just some woman who decided to run a course, really. This is a type A personality like myself who was like, I'll do it, you know? Um, yeah, do you think that that comes, I mean, this is just me spitballing here, right? That sounds
Yeah.
like someone who's got low self-worth, who doesn't think that they're smart enough to actually figure it out for themselves. So they have to like trust the experts in some
Yeah.
sense.
I think self-worth is part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think the appeal to authority, as you said,
Mm.
is so huge within us that it's like if someone sounds smarter than you,
Mm,
or like you feel like they might have done the research, a lot
mm,
of people are just like, okay, well, I'll just believe them then.
yeah.
It's like it's a laziness.
Yeah.
It's a lack of critical thinking or the desire to like pull on a thread and or to like something that I do intentionally, and I think you do this as well, is you'll take on one thing and feel like, okay, that feels true for me. But what's happening over here? Like, what
Mm,
about the people who believe this? I'm
yes.
gonna look at them. Like, what makes them believe that? Or it's like
Yeah.
you got to do it all and then come to your own conclusion. But I
Yeah.
don't think many people are willing to do that. They're not willing to look stupid. They're not
Yes.
willing to change their beliefs. They're not willing to put themselves out in an arena and be like, oh, yeah, I fucked up. I was wrong.
Yeah.
Or I've since changed my beliefs. It's like a lot of people feel like they have to know it all and to say anything, and I feel like, especially in that arena where it's like the privilege and the wokeness and the trans stuff and the feminism and racism and all the isms,
Mm,
you're constantly told as a bad person that you
mm,
don't have a voice. And
mm.
so even if you think differently, a lot of people just don't, they just shut up. They think, well, okay. Like they don't think about it enough to
Yeah.
actually speak up.
Or
Like if
they've
someone
also
says to
been
me, well, you've got
you
privilege, you can't talk about this. I'm like, well, hang on, no, I can.
mm,
No, but a lot of people will be like, oh, okay, sorry.
yeah, that's what I was about to say. If you've been told as well that your voice doesn't matter, then so even if you have a different opinion, you would be told, well, that's just your internal racism speaking. So you would disregard your own self because you've been programmed that way. I had someone come at me on the comments on one of my posts on Instagram who told me I had internalized misogyny.
Oh, I have that too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a condition I was born with. It's not my fault. Um, yeah, I had her and like three other women who just like fully came at me and were like, "You have internalized misogyny." And my friend Jaguar and I went toe for toe with them in the comment section. And eventually, I was like, "Actually, I'm just going to block you because I don't actually need to engage in this." And this person is not actually interested in listening to what I'm saying. They kept saying the same rhetoric over and over again, even though I had engaged in discussion with that, they weren't interested in that. These were people who were just repeating and they were not listening. So it's interesting because you might want to question, but you've been told and brainwashed. So any questioning, you're like, yeah, that proves that I am the bad person. They are right. So you doubt yourself, which is just wild. It's just
It's the whole thing is a complete, I don't know what other word to say except head fuck.
yeah,
It's like it's just,
yeah,
and those were the conversations that I would have almost every night with Brendan in that time of like, there's just no way in. There's just no way into
yeah,
these women because you're always the baddie. Like
yeah,
you don't know enough, you haven't read the white privilege book, or you're not black, so you don't have a voice, or
mm,
you have internalized misogyny, so you can't talk about women. Like
yeah,
there's always some kind of like divide.
yeah,
That's what they're looking for. It's like, oh, well, you're the bad guy, so
yeah,
it's your fault. Nothing's my responsibility.
yes.
So I'm going to throw all this blame and anger at you because you're the bad person.
Mm.
That's
And
it.
the backlash to that, like the trad wife movement, that's really come up as a result. And I know some trad wives are like, we've always been here. Yeah, I'm sure you have, but I'm talking about the agenda. It's the same way the
Uh-huh.
feminists are like, I'm not that kind of feminist. Great. I'm talking about the agenda. So the agenda of like the feminist agenda that's going on right now and the appropriate backlash to that, which always happens. This is the planet of balance. It's going to balance that out. It's a hardcore fundamentalist conservative Christian trad wife movement, the agenda that is there, that is, and in the men's space, the red pill movement that kind of sat on the end of that as well, has the same sense in it of this cult-like mentality that doesn't allow anyone who is like, you're saying you're not a feminist, but there you are, your husband was making you breakfast the other
I
morning.
know, right?
Just not very trad wife of you, Aimee. So where do you sit? So if you're a little bit in the middle, you're kind of like this lost little lamb, just kind of going, well, I'm not this and I'm not that. And people instinctively want to feel part of your community. So it's very, very hard. I think that's where when you started bringing that to my awareness, feminine, not feminist, and I kind of started dismantling my feminist programming because I was totally like, I am a feminist. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I really started looking into it and I did go, oh, this makes more sense to be like more this way. And then they got more extreme and I was like, oh, I'm not that extreme. I like what you're saying, but you've now got some rules that are well above and beyond what I'm willing to agree to. Um,
Yeah.
so I kind of decided to sit in the middle and be like the voice that kind of was like, hey, we also are individuals who have bio-individual circumstances, different genetics, different places of birth, living family systems. Like there are lots of things that could be going on here. Like even the want to label things as masculine and feminine. Um, I think is for me personally, I think is just so wild. And can really lead people to be like, oh, I'm being masculine if I go to work. Oh, I don't know what to do about that. I don't want to be masculine because that's bad because I'm a woman and I like the feminine stuff and I don't want to be a feminist because I see that those people are crazy. And then so I'm going to sit over here, but they say that I can't work. But now I need to work but that means that I'm masculine and I see these in my Q&As and in other people's Q&As where it's like, how do I balance being a working woman and not being masculine? I'm like, how about women who work aren't masculine? How about we just get rid of that languaging? It's crazy. It's crazy. Like that's not what makes you masculine. Like you're a woman. You're not going to be masculine. It's just relax. Just let yourself go for a minute. Stop trying to be something or not be something. So confusing for women out there at the moment. It's just, and there are very few people that I know that kind of speak logically and sit in the middle. And you are one of those people. And this is why, like, I love your stuff. And I'm so glad that you're
Thank
doing a
you.
podcast now as well. What's that? My Mama Summer? Is that it?
My mama summer, yeah.
I like it. So yeah, listen to Amy's podcast. Is it on all the streaming platforms?
All the places. Yes, you can
Yay.
find it anywhere. Just look for my mama summer.
Yeah. So like there are very few people who um are logical in this. It's so emotional as
Mm.
as you would expect
Mm.
from the women's the women's side of things.
We are emotional kind of humans, like,
Yes.
and that's not bad.
No.
Uh, but I do feel like humans in general just have this, and this has been a theme of our conversation so far, is like we're just looking for those labels.
Mm.
We don't know what to do if there isn't a label that we can attach to.
Mm.
And even, we just had the election, right?
Yeah.
I just wrote about this in a post. I don't think it's out yet. I can't remember. But like you say, there's the trad wife movement. It's like, okay, if you want to cook at home and live on a farm, you also have to wear floral dresses,
Yes.
have 10 babies,
Hmm.
be a Mormon.
Hmm.
Like, it's like, okay, do you tick all these boxes? You can be over here. Like,
Yeah.
if you want to like have homeless people being clothed and fed, you also have to be a rabid feminist.
Yes.
No, that's a complete lie. Just choose whatever you want from all of the things
Mm.
and make up your own stuff.
Yeah.
Like you can be whatever you want to be. You don't have to fit into these boxes. That is a complete lie. I think that is one of the biggest lies that
Yes.
causes all of this.
Yeah. And you're so right, just thinking about the election as well. Like I'm not a fan of Trump. I don't think anybody's going to particularly save us. But what I did like what happened at the end is that he became like this collector of different views. So like you got RFK, you got Tulsi Gabbard, you've got all these different people who are a little bit different. They weren't hive mindset. They were criticizing each other. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to bring you all in and we're all going to work together. I was like, okay, I don't like you, but I can get on board with the team effort that you're bringing in diversity, the true diversity, which allows criticism, which allows like critical thinking, which allows people to just not have to fit into certain types of boxes, which is like, I believe you on this bit, but I actually disagree with you on this bit. That doesn't mean I'm for you or against you. It just means I'm my own person with my own opinion. And like we used
Yeah,
to have that. We don't have that
that,
anymore.
that's what's kind of been taken away. People feel like they can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, are you a Republican? No. Are you this?
No.
No. Like, well, what are you then? Which box can I put you in? Like they glitch. Like,
Yeah.
like if you share something that's Trump or whatever, it's
Yeah.
like all of a sudden, oh, okay,
Yeah.
now I know that she's a Republican.
Yeah.
Right, cool. All right, okay. But then you share this thing and it like confuses the shit out of people when
Yeah.
you don't fit into all of the boxes.
Yes. I had someone ask me in my Q&A last week, who did you vote for? And I was like, I'm Australian. I didn't even vote. I didn't even vote. But, it is like, I need to know how to treat you because I treat all of these people the same and I treat all
Yes.
of these people the same. So if you could just tell me which box you fit into, then I don't have to actually get to know you on a personal level. I could just treat you that way. And I am justified in how I'm treating you.
Do I
And
need to unfollow you right
yeah,
now because you're a
100%.
Republican?
100%. It's the same with like
So weird.
I had a whole bunch of friends get really upset when COVID happened. They're like, you're a right-wing extremist. And I was like, this is so weird because I've always considered myself to be left-leaning. I was like, I'm like a 1960s hippie. Like, I'm like peace, love among things, man. Like, I just feel like the left went all the way over there and I just stayed here. So I guess now that makes me a right-wing extremist because the time that shifted, not me. You know,
Yeah.
my views are pretty much still the same. Like they have never really changed. Um, they have evolved, sure, but like I haven't had any extreme moments other than my feminine versus feminist stuff. But in terms of like politically, like I still think there should be less government, but that used to be left and now it's right. Like that doesn't mean that I've changed. It just means that the spectrum of that has changed, which now puts me in a category that you get to treat me a certain way, like I'm crazy, and that my opinions are not valid because I am an extremist, which is just like baffling to me. Like, but these people know me. They're like, oh, we know you. We've known you for 10 years, but that's crazy. You can't think like that. I always thought like this. I'm not a quiet person. It's not like you didn't know how I thought, and all of a sudden I've just come out with like, I don't think vaccines are a really great idea for everybody. You always knew that. But now it's okay to put me in this category because now everybody else who thinks like that is in that category. So that's where you go. And now we don't like those people because those people are a danger to the public, danger to people,
Yeah.
reasonable people like us who are just working really hard, to keep people safe. And my poor grandma, all these things. It's just like, you just hear the propaganda and the rhetoric, the brainwashing that has been going on. You just hear it coming out of their mouths. And how do you reach these people? I actually don't know. The only way I know to do it is to keep coming back to, but actually, you know me and you know I'm a good person. And I had this conversation recently with a friend where I was like, we have very different views. That's okay. I'm actually okay with you being completely different to me. I know you're a really good person. You have a really good heart. And I know that you know that about me.
Mm.
You and I just have very different ideas about what we think is best for the world. We actually both think that we're helping humanity. It's just that it's completely opposite. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. You got to decide whether you're okay with that. That's on you to decide. That's your own journey. But I can be like, yeah, you're got some crazy stuff that I just, I can't get on board with, but I know where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And I want to know where you're coming from. I want to understand why do you think like that? Tell me the thought process around that. And then I can go, okay, yeah, I see how you get to that. Disagree, but I understand. You're not there trying to harm people. You just genuinely think that's the right thing to do. And so I can be compassionate towards you. I can be kind towards you. We can have conversations, we can have relationship, but people have just lost the art of conversing, I guess, because we're doing this
Yes.
online all the time.
I am like you, and that's why we kind of understand
Mm,
each other. It's
yeah.
like I come at the world and humans with a strong sense of curiosity.
Mm,
And so if I see someone with a different opinion, I'm like, wow, how did they get there?
mm,
Like I'm so curious about that. What led
yes.
you to this point?
Yeah.
And I would love, so many times I have that thought and I would love to have that conversation, but I just know it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And so I have to like just lay awake for 2 hours making it up in my head,
Yeah.
having the conversation.
Yeah.
Um, but I feel like we've been trained to just be so divided and to look for the enemy that we've
Mm.
lost that capacity. And so many people don't have that curiosity and wonder.
Mm.
Because I
Mm.
believe that if if we were in the other person's shoes and had experienced every single thing that they had experienced up until that point, we would be in the exact same position. Like there's
Yeah.
a reason why they're there.
Yeah.
Um, we're just so attached to making things good or bad all the time.
Yeah. This is so true because it's just easier holding the tension of opposites, like, and holding the nuance is so difficult for people that it's just easier to just be like, oh, I don't have any responsibility to be present in my body, to feel that that feels uncomfortable, to hold that this and this may also be true at the same time. And that's just too much. It's easier to just let it go and be like, yep, you're over there and I'm over here. And now we don't speak. Like
Yeah.
it's these we've been so disconnected from our bodies and our abilities. Like we all have the ability to do that. It's not like you and I are special. It's just that people have been deconditioned. We've been less resilient, I think, probably due to technology, probably due to our parenting, maybe due to propaganda as well. Like I'm not sure what it all comes down to, but I think it's multifaceted that we've just been deconditioned as humans. Like humans, our human abilities have gotten a little bit less, and we don't know how to human anymore. Like there are people who don't know how to talk to people in real life. Like they only know how
Yeah.
to talk online. That's scary to me. I'm like, you need to get out there.
Yeah. And people don't put themselves in the position of learning about other
Mm,
people's beliefs and why they're there. I remember when Brendan and I were still living in Sydney, so this is a while back, we I had this idea and I was like, this is something that I want to do. I want to start like a group, like an in-person group
mm,
where we get people together and we have some kind of topic for the day that's like polarizing, super
mm,
polarizing, like all the stuff that you're not supposed to talk about.
mm,
And so we have a topic and we have some kind of like stick, talking stick.
mm.
And everyone gets to share their view on that topic
Yeah.
with no butting in, none of that stuff. It's just like everyone gets to share. So you're forced to understand other people's opinions about one specific topic, and it's like 20 people there or whatever, and
Love
you just
that.
have to hear it, and it's just like, and then there's like a sharing afterwards of like, okay, well, what do you, where are you at now, kind of thing. Like, how was that for you? And I don't even know if that would be a good idea or not, but I still feel like people need something like that. They need to put themselves in a position where they hear other opinions and understand the why behind it.
Did you ever come to my documentary nights?
No. I
That's
remember you having those. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
But
it was exactly that. So
no way.
yeah, so we would all bring food and I made everyone bring vegetarian food. I'm so sorry, everybody. But we all ate together. So that was really important that we all brought something to eat and we all ate each other's food. And then we all spent this time bonding at the beginning over food because I'm Italian. That's how we bond. Bring food, we're going to eat together. Then I introduced the movie. Then we watched the movie. Then at the end, we all sat in a circle and one by one, we said one thing that we got from the documentary. When the last
Yeah.
person went, it was open discussion for debates. And it was amazing because we all just watched the exact same
Yeah.
thing. Yet we had 20 different opinions on what happened. And people were like, how did you get that conclusion from what we just watched? Like, I did not get that. And it was fascinating and it was wild because you would have these debates. So for me, I was like, this facilitates communication, community. It also facilitates debate and discussion that you don't agree with. And then it facilitated tolerance because, this week, me and Mike over there are on opposite teams where I'm like, that's not what I got from that. And I don't agree with that. Next week, Mike and I sitting next to each other against someone else
High
going,
fiving.
yeah, like we're totally on the same team. Like, how did you get? So it was amazing because one week you're the same, one week you're different, and you had to be flexible, you had to be resilient, you had to be tolerant, and you had to just hold those opinions loose and chat with each other. And still to this day, 2 weekends ago, I caught up with some friends who used to come to my documentary nights, and they're like, out of everything that used to happen in our little hippie community, they're like, that's the thing I miss the most because nobody
Wow.
does that anymore. But I can't imagine anybody now getting up and leaving their house to attend something like that
Yeah.
at someone else's
Yeah.
house. And in Zoom, they have their cameras off. No one's going to
Yeah.
participate. If you do a Zoom, they're like, oh yeah, whatever. It's not the same.
Yeah. It is not the same. But as you were talking, I was like, do we need to create something like this?
Yeah. I would do it again in a heartbeat. Maybe in a few years when I have a little bit more familial
Yeah.
freedom. Um,
Yeah.
but that's something that, yeah, I really loved that. I loved facilitating that. Um,
I just feel like people shy away from that and I don't know if it's unconscious, if it's intentional, like
Mhm.
why we do that. But there's so much value in speaking with people with
It's
other opinions and
probably
ideas.
their family system. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
just thinking about it now, probably like if there was conflict in their family, you're in trouble. Like, I'm Italian. We used to yell at each other all the time, and it just meant I love you. Like, the louder you're yelling, because it was like I can express myself and yell and scream. It doesn't mean I'm angry. It means I'm
Mm,
passionate. And no matter how much I might be angry at you now, I never stop loving you.
yeah.
So there was like this acceptance of like full range and spectrum of emotions and opinions. And like even my grandmother would be like, this person's a bloody idiot, like she's saying in Italian, about her own son. And, but that's her son. And don't you ever say that. But you can hold the tension of the opposites and have these different opinions. And you would yell and scream at each other. But it just was like accepted that's not okay to actually fight though.
Yeah.
You love each other. It's not okay to stop loving each other because you have different opinions. You are part of the family. You are blood till death. That is it. But you can get passionate about things. And I noticed because I'm half Australian as well. So then I would go to my Aussie side. It was all very civilized. It was all very much like, that's very rude. That's very disrespectful. Don't speak like that. Even though I have a pretty Aussie grandmother who's, he'll say Tuesday and Friday and things like that. She's pretty bogan in that sense, and she says some wild shit. There's still a lot of rules around, like don't
Yeah.
speak like that. So there would never have been those kind of discussions on that side of the family. And I'm not to say one's more right or wrong, but it gave me a sense of what was possible. And I think if you've never grown up experiencing that discussion, debate, heat, and passion can be done in a healthy way. If you've never experienced that, you've only ever experienced in your family when your parents were fighting and it was a bad thing, or if the world's fighting, it means war. That's all you know. So you're going to avoid that at all costs. You're going to sit down and shut the fuck up because you don't want to be the cause of that. That's terrifying I think, for some people.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah,
can
totally.
understand that.
Well, I was born in England. I have a Scottish dad and an English mother. And
Mm,
so the typical like they're even more repressed. Like UK, England, like
yeah,
the emotions just like that's not even a thing. They're
yeah,
just it's so deep that it's like the conflict isn't allowed. It's like
yeah.
it doesn't happen. So it's interesting kind of all the different places people come from and
So how do they deal
what
with
makes them
you
them.
in your in
Well,
your family system?
my
Are you
dad,
like the disruptor?
well, my dad is kind of like me. Well, we joke that it's the Devlin gene. It's like
Hmm.
the poke the bear kind of like thing that's kind of like inside,
Hmm.
like it's
Yeah.
genetic. But it's interesting because my mum's mum is like that and my dad is like that. So they're from two opposite sides,
Hmm.
and then I'm like that. And I've always been like that. Just, I don't know, I've just always thought that way. I've
Mm.
always been like, just, I want to take on my own ideas, not what you think I should do or believe or whatever, and that's from a very young age.
Yeah.
Very young age. I remember that.
So you weren't
I,
punished for that?
no,
That's good.
no, I wasn't punished for that. That wasn't shut down in me because my dad kind of encouraged that within all of us. Um, but yeah, like emotional intelligence, I'd say like isn't really like from my lineage.
Yeah.
It's like something I've grown and worked on
Yeah.
intentionally.
I think as well, like you've got some generational stuff going on. I mean, you think back to like medieval times, people were having their tongues cut out and their hands cut off, and people were like hung and quartered and put in the stocks, for having different opinions or using a herb in a remedy. It was pretty, you couldn't really do much. And I would say that there's something in there that's, I mean, that's pretty traumatic for everybody to witness.
Mm,
They're bringing little children to executions like it was a freaking
yeah,
street party.
like a show.
Yeah, like it's just wild to think. And that's going to be in most people's DNA structure. That's going to
Mm.
be some kind of thing that's floating down through the generational. Yeah, I don't know. It's a lot to unpack. I'm like sitting here and deep in thought now. I'm like fascination. Yeah, I wonder where that all comes from. Why we can't have discussions, and where we can't
So many
accept.
places.
Yeah, it's.
I
I
mean, when
think.
you think about it, like it's interesting today because specifically like all the woke stuff
Mm,
is built on this premise of inclusion and diversity,
mm,
but
tolerance,
but it's completely intolerant. Like,
100%.
and they can't see that. It's like
Yeah,
this huge blind spot. It's like, it's,
I can't
it's
accept
such a,
you because you're intolerant. Okay,
yeah,
I'm a very
it's
tolerant
so,
person.
it's so funny. Like,
Yeah, the
and that
irony.
at some people wake up to that and realize,
Mm,
and then they're like, oh wow, I've been calling people all these names and it's actually me. Oopsies.
mm. Well, it's kind of like
But
what they did with Trump. Like they were saying, not to like promote Trump, but when they were
are you
saying
a
that
Republican?
I am a Republican, an Australian Republican. No, but they were saying things like, that he was going to censor people online and that he was going to go after his political opponents, but actually that's what they were doing by doing that to him. I was like, is no one seeing this right now? Like we know, do you guys know he's been in power before and he didn't do that. He actually didn't prosecute Hillary, which I was like, hello, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and he's now come on Joe Rogan and said, oh, the reason I didn't do that because I didn't think it would be good for the country to be in division like that. And I was like, that's an interesting thought. But they were, coming after him, doing the same things to him that they were then accusing him of doing. They were literally gaslighting an entire country, and it was working. Like people could not see that. Like they talk about like fascism, but they are actually fascists themselves. Like it's just the mind gymnastics that you have to do to end up in this place. I think that
Yeah.
must be exhausting for these people to know
Mm.
on some they've got to know on some level that this is not congruent. So to
I
kind of
think,
make it right.
yeah,
Oh yeah, now we got there, go through all of these loops. Crazy.
I think that's one of the biggest things in feminism is that deep down inside of all of these angry,
Mm,
you know, women who are just projecting and vomiting all this bleh
mm,
at men and at other women and all of that kind of stuff. I think deep down it's just coming from a really wounded
yeah.
place, specifically from, if you look at the tradwives or if you look at,
Mm,
just anyone there's so many different kinds of women out there. Uh, we, a lot of, I feel like there is something in a woman that really would love to be supported and cared for and looked after and protected by a man. And I feel that that is innate to every woman. Like it's
yeah.
just what we need. Like we have children and we need that to look after them. And it's like everybody wants that. Every woman, I believe, I'm going to say this, that every woman wants that.
Mm,
And when we don't get that, it's obviously instead of looking at ourselves and being
yeah.
like, fuck, that hurts that I don't have that for myself.
Yeah.
We're like, fuck you instead at
Yeah.
the woman who has it or at the
Yeah.
man who's providing that. It's just like it's the unconscious around us.
Yeah. For sure. I think, when I was a feminist, I really wanted someone to be stronger than me so I could relax, because it is exhausting to hold all of that all the time. And I was like, no men are strong enough. That was my whole thing. I was like, come on, be tougher than me, be stronger than me. I can lift that. Why can't you lift that, you weak piece of, POS? What are you doing? Pick it up. But, I was working at the markets lifting 20-kilo sacks of
Yes.
potatoes all the time. You're like, what's wrong with the men these days? You know?
Well, if you just gave them the opportunity, Lauren,
Well, this is what
perhaps they would
happened.
help you.
This is what happened. So I was at the markets, and I don't know if you remember Lucy, who worked at the markets. She was from, oh God, I can't remember, some Eastern European country.
Okay.
She was this older woman, and I was carrying this 20-kilo sack of potatoes, putting them in the back of the truck. And this guy comes up and he says, can I give you a hand with that? And I was like, I'm fine. Thank you. And I was like, that's so weird that this guy, like, does he think that I'm weak, that I can't do it? Like, that was my mindset. And she came up to me and she said, why did you just do that? And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, that was very rude. And I was, what do you mean that was rude? And she said, you just gave away an opportunity for him and for yourself. You just robbed him of the chance to be a knight in shining armor, to be in his masculine and to help a woman. You took that chance away from him. And I was like, oh shit, I didn't even think about that. And she was like, and you took the chance away from yourself to be taken care of and to be cherished and to be relaxed in your work. Like you actually just cock blocked the both of you, for lack of a better
Yes.
term,
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. I found it insulting. I was like, this man thinks that I'm so weak that I can't, like, I do this every day, dude. Like, why are you coming here wanting to be some kind of hero? But I hadn't seen it in that way. No one had explained it to me in that way. So
Thanks, Lucy.
yeah, thank you, Lucy. She was really wonderful with a whole bunch of things. And she was one of the first people as well that used to tell me, I've still got it. She made me kidney warmers. She used to knit them and make them. And she's like, you have to keep your kidneys and your ovaries warm. It's important for women to keep them warm when we're out working outside. Like, just real, actual women taking care of women stuff. But she wasn't aggressive, when she said this to me. She was just
Yeah.
like, why did you do that? And then explained what that opportunity was that I had seen in a different view. And it totally changed things for me. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. But deep down, I was desperately wanting that. I was desperately wanting to just let go of everything. I felt like I was carrying everything and it was too much. And I was like, I need someone to help me. And then someone's like, can I help you? I'm like, no, it's fine. You know? So we almost block ourselves. And I think you're right. I think women desperately want to be taken care of. And women will argue with me with this. And I will say to them, become a mother. There is no way. There is no way that you can do that by yourself. And there will be women out there who's like, I've done IVF as a single mom and I do it. I'm like, yeah, does your kid go into daycare? Or are you doing everything by yourself? If you are doing everything by yourself, how are you financially affording it? Are you paying for your house? Are you paying for your groceries as well as exclusively breastfeeding, being there all the time for the child? You can't. You cannot do it all. It is impossible. And it is the most egregious lie that we tell women, that you can have it all. You can be a mom and you can go back to work and you can be a boss babe and you can, do whatever you need to do. It's not true. It's absolutely not true. And when women fail in that, because you are going to fail in that, then they blame themselves and they feel like they're not good enough, when actually you've just been sold a lie. Something will get dropped, whether it's you or your baby or your relationship or your work, or you just take turns in dropping them. It's like something is going to get dropped. Stop telling women that they can do it all. That's what feminists do. They lie to these women and then they gaslight them when it's like, but I couldn't do it all. I actually needed help. I needed someone to take care of me. It's like, well, that's your own fault, really. It's just, it's
Yeah.
horrible. It's horrible, these poor women. Because that's when you're at your most primal. That's when you're at your most vulnerable, when you're at your most feminine. The most feminine thing you can do is give birth. So you
Yeah,
can't deny in that moment, you need protecting.
totally. You need support, you need
Yeah.
help, you need like so many things in that
Yeah.
situation. And instead of like sitting with that and if you're someone who didn't have that
Mm,
and processing that wounding,
mm,
uh women choose to point the finger at other people instead. Like,
Mm.
well, like it's like if a woman does appear to have it all, like there are so
Mm.
many people, women in the specific, like in the trad wife movement,
Mm.
that kind of thing, who project that they have it all. Like you would look at them,
Yeah.
and if you didn't have a strong sense of self, you would look at them and be like, "What's wrong with me?"
Mm.
You know, like why can't I have all of these things? Like you think because you see it
Mm.
on Instagram that they
Mm.
have it all. They're dropping shit tons of stuff.
Yeah.
Like they just don't show you.
It's like Ballerina
Um,
Farm. You know Ballerina Farm?
yes, yes.
She
I wrote about her recently.
she has come out and said, I don't make meals like this every day. I make it maybe once a month.
Yeah,
She fed her kids freaking McDonald's. I've seen her do it. Like give her baby McDonald's, but she's got this people want to believe what they want. Even though she's come out and said it, people will see what they want to see and see that she's feeding this elaborate home cooked 20-hour prep time meal for her 10 children and her husband every day, 3 times a day. It's just not possible. There's no way she's doing that. And
yeah,
her children
yeah,
she's like homeschools, but they don't. They have a private tutor that comes in
yeah,
and tutors her. She doesn't do any of that. The private tutor does that. And her husband's not
yeah,
just working on the farm by himself. Like they have employees. No one is doing this by themselves. It's an illusion. And if you will
yeah,
kill yourself trying to do it all on your own.
yeah.
Crazy.
And and I think just the fact that she has 10 million followers
Mm,
shows me that that's what women want. Like,
yeah.
why are 10 million women following her?
Mm,
Because they're voyeurs, and at some level, part of them wants that.
mm,
Like, they want pieces of what she is projecting to have.
yeah.
Like, that's just the reality of it, whether you have noticed that about yourself or not.
Yeah.
That's true. It's
Yeah.
just how it is.
Yeah.
But that's what's lacking. That's just what I keep coming to as the
Mm,
problem is the lack of ability to reflect on yourself, to take
mm,
on, to process emotions, to look at yourself critically, to look in the mirror and see, okay, well, I was triggered because of this thing, and that's not really that person's fault. That's my thing, and this is how I can work with that. Like,
mm.
how else can we, I don't know, change any of that stuff without people being willing to do that?
I think it has to come back to a sense of reality. Like when I'm talking to kids, especially young boys, about being careful with young girls, I explain to them your body is actually made differently. At some point, your body is made to get more muscle than her. You're going to be larger than her, most likely. You're going to be stronger than her, and you're going to be faster than her. You have to be gentle with her because she's not like the other boys that you're playing with. She needs to be protected because her body is not made that way. She doesn't, and when you're talking to little girls, you have to say to them, don't kick them between the legs because they've got stuff there that could actually hurt them. So we're coming back to this like sense of like reality, like
Mm-hmm.
biological reality. If we start there with little kids, that in itself opens up, like just saying, hey, your body is made in a way that is made to protect because it is bigger, faster, stronger. You have much more muscle mass. Your center of gravity is different. You can't deny those things. There's no one that can argue that that is incorrect. So therefore you go, okay, well, now if we take this reality and we take this reality and we look at the roles in life, look at what do you do in this life? Who is more aligned to do that thing and who is more naturally aligned to do that thing? You can't also can't argue against that because that's where it
Well, you
lands.
can,
Well, you can,
but
but
we won't.
you can, but you'd be wrong.
That's right.
Like I think when we let go of, and this is a post I did recently where I was like, my biggest journey in this whole thing was to let go of the fantasy and just stop with the fantasy, just stop. And I was fucking my own head over with the ideas of what I should and shouldn't have. And, like seeing Ballerina Farm and things like, I want a farm and I want to do that. But actually, if you go live on a farm, it's a lot of work. Maybe I don't actually want to do that much work. Maybe I don't want to
Yeah.
get up at the crack of dawn and go feed all the animals. That's a pain in the ass. So let go of the fantasy, come back to reality. I don't want to live in fantasy land anymore. Fantasy land's great for like when you intentionally go into it to try and figure out where you want to create and your reality and where you want to work towards in your life. That's a really great tool. It's not that fantasy is bad, it's that fantasy is being used incorrectly in this day and age. And if we bring everything back to reality, if I start looking in reality, let's look at everybody I know and their marriages. Let's look at what works, what doesn't work. Why did they break up? Why are they still together? What's their secret? What was their downfall? That's the reality. We have some great ideas, but does it play out in reality? That's where I'm at right now. Like, can we just talk about what's real? Please. Because I love that everyone has great ideas. I have great ideas. You have great ideas. There's so many great ideas on the internet, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to then work in the real world. And I think that's where we've lost the plot a little bit. It's like we can still say, what a great idea. And then it might not work in reality.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great fantasy. What a great fantasy. We should start saying that.
100%. Maybe my idea of everyone living in reality is the fantasy.
I think it might be. Wow, we're getting a bit meta here.
Oh no. This is getting very Inception, isn't it?
It's true though.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what these social media platforms create. We have our real self and we create a persona to share with the world on these platforms. And specifically on Instagram, that's my least favorite platform because of this. Like I've just never really found my way there because of that. And I read a book called The Psychology of Social Networks by a guy called Joe Federer, and this nailed it for me. And the way he explains the different networks in the different ways, like psychological categories. And so Instagram is a super ego network. Facebook is an ego network. And what this means is that on Facebook, you're generally like friends with people that you know in real life.
Yes.
Yeah, you might have some people who you've met at the shop or whatever, like if you're using it normally. Whereas Instagram, because it's following, you have people who follow you. You can choose to follow a celebrity and someone might follow you, but there's this potential of like this possibility of all these people following you one day. Because you don't have to, it's not a mutual relationship.
Yeah.
And so what we do unconsciously is we create this super ego persona that we put out into the world. And it's like our ultimate ideal self. And we project all this stuff into that persona and pretend that's what we are. Like we highlight all the really like, that's why we have the filters and that's why we have all of this stuff that, oh, look, my life is always like this, or that's just what Instagram reads.
The highlight reel.
It's the highlight reel.
Yeah.
And then people feel shit because of it. Like they think that other people's lives are this way, but it's an absolute farce. And a lot of people don't have the capacity to realize that. They just kind of spend so much time in these fantasy worlds that they think their world is somehow less than all of these other people's real lives. But the whole thing is a fantasy.
Yeah.
It's everybody's fantasy. It's like my representation of myself interacting with your representation of yourself. It's like living in a video game.
Yeah, well, now we have the VR one.
Oh,
I saw a reel today where people were talking, they were in the VR universe and they were asking people as a character in the VR universe, what's the longest time that they've ever been in the VR universe? And people were like, it's been like a month that I've been in here every single day. One person was like, this is the longest right now. I've been up for 72 hours. I haven't slept. People like, I went to sleep with the VR goggles on and I slept in the VR universe. And then I woke up and just started playing again. And you're like, oh, wow, these people are like literally not living in reality. They're literally living in spending an entire week or an entire month in a completely alternative reality. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a lot.
Yeah, that's taking it even further.
Yeah. But that's the future. That's what they want to do. Put goggles on everybody and then you're easily controlled. You're not contributing to reality. You're not contributing to society. I feel like I'm onto something here with this reality thing. I feel like, come on, guys, we've got to hold on to reality right now. Come on.
No, they're trying to take it from us. They are.
That's what it feels. It feels like that's the last bastion of hope, is like acknowledging reality, because everything else is a mind game. Everything else is word jumbles and definitions and labels and broad spectrum ideas and
Mm.
fantasy lands and highlight reels. And it's like, whoa, can go anywhere.
And if you ask a lot of people about reality, like, well, who are you? Or, what do you stand
Mm,
for or whatever? Like, what percentage of people would share and something with you that came from within themselves as opposed
mm,
to externally?
yeah.
Like, well, I'm a Republican, well, I'm a, Christian, or well, I'm
Mm,
a homeschooler, or I'm an anti whatever.
yeah.
Like, but who are you not in relation to all the other things?
Yeah.
Like, I think we've been trained to do that so much that it's like innate now. Who are we
Yeah.
without all those external labels and
Well,
stuff?
it used to be your job before social media. It used to be your job. Like that's what
Yeah.
you do. That's not who you are. But now
Yes.
people don't even know what other people do for a living
Yeah.
because it's actually like, but who are you in the fantasy? Who are you in my label system? It's not like half the
Where do I put
people,
you?
yeah, they don't even know what their friends do because it doesn't matter anymore. That's not the external factor now. The external factor
Mm,
is the social stuff, the fantasy over there, which is wild.
that is wild.
I wouldn't even know how to answer it, to be honest. Like if someone
Yeah.
was to say, "Who are you?" I think about it often, and I'm like, but
Mm,
everything that I would say is an idea that I've learnt off someone else. Even if I was to
yeah.
say, I am an infinite being, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
I'm a clump of atoms. It's all ideas. I think
Yeah.
the most honest thing would be to say, I don't know who I am, but I'm having fun figuring it out.
Yeah.
It's changing every moment. That's all I can give you right now.
Yeah.
I can tell you my opinions on things. I can tell you how I came to be a certain way, but to tell you who I am, I think it would be disingenuous to say that I know exactly. I have a strong sense of self, but I don't think that's the same thing. I don't
Yeah.
think it's the same thing if someone's saying, "Who are you?" My old
I,
podcast, I used to ask people that in the
uh,
first question. I'd be like, "Okay, tell me, who are you?" And they would be like, "That's a huge question." I was like, "Yeah, let's kick it off with a big one."
let's kick it off with a big pause.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 20 minutes of
I think what you share there is one of the things that people are afraid to do nowadays is to say, I don't know.
Mm,
I'm not really sure. I don't have an opinion on that because I don't have enough information yet.
yeah.
Like that's been taken away or sidelined for having to have some kind of opinion on everything or
Mm,
having to speak out about everything. Like especially in the activist kind of world. This is
yeah.
how, like people have this people feel like they can control you. Like, well, why aren't you speaking up about Israel and Palestine? You should be doing this because of your blah blah blah. I mean, you can insert any issue there
Yes.
inside that sentence, right? And it's like, no, I don't have to do anything. Like,
Yeah.
I am my own person. Like, why are you trying to
Yeah.
put these rules on me?
Yeah.
We feel like we control other people these days. But what's
Yeah.
wrong with saying, oh yeah, I actually would love it if more people said that.
I don't know.
Like, what do you think about this? I really don't
I
know.
don't know. Yeah.
I don't know enough. I don't know enough to have an opinion
Yeah.
on it. That would be
Yeah.
really refreshing.
It would be refreshing. And it would be like refreshing if then the way that you challenge someone who thought that they did know would to just be like, are you sure that you know? How do you know this? But yeah, is it Byron Katie? And she says,
Yes,
do you
yes.
really know? Like, are you sure? I don't remember what it is, but it's like you
The
have to
fourth
ask them
question.
twice. Like, are
Yeah,
you
yeah,
sure? Are
yeah.
you really, really sure that that's the truth? And you're like, shit, it makes you question it. And you go, oh, maybe it isn't. Because your first immediate response is like automatic. And then she makes you ask it again. And you're like, oh, I have to really think about that now. Yeah, maybe I
Yeah.
don't know that that's the truth. I
How do you
don't.
know it's true or something like that is the
Yeah.
question.
Is it
Yeah.
really true? Yeah. I love that. I love that. I think it would be good. Well, I feel like this is a good place to wrap it up.
Yes.
This has been amazing. Thank you for coming on and having a chat
You're
with me.
welcome. It's
um,
so beautiful to reconnect. To
yes,
see
it's
your beautiful
I
face.
know. I want to take a trip to Mexico and
We look like
come visit all of you over there now. So many of you over there. And I'm so
yeah.
glad that you've all connected.
Oh man, we're having so much fun. It's really
Yeah,
beautiful.
I'm glad. Um, Tell people where they can find you, Aimee, and what you're doing, and if they want to hear more of your I don't know musings.
Yeah. The main place at the moment is My Mama Summer.
Hmm.
And so that's a podcast and it's also the name of my website and Substack. So it's mymamasummer.com, mymamasummer.com. I have really been getting into Substack lately. And I was going to message you and say, Lauren, you need to create a Substack because I didn't actually know really what a Substack was.
Yeah,
My like Brennan, has been writing on there for years,
yeah,
but I only just recently realized that it is now also some kind of like it's also kind of like a social network
yeah,
in a way where you can find people who are into the same thing as you
yeah,
and who have different opinions to you and you can learn and subscribe and like have
yeah,
conversations and to me like I've been spending a lot more of my time there
yeah.
and not on social media anymore because I've used social media for my business stuff for a long time and it's
Mm,
just I'm just done with it. I just
yeah,
feel like no one sees anything and
yeah,
it's just really hard.
yeah.
But Substack's in this beautiful phase of growth and
Mm,
it's where we're proving that the other platforms are a lie. Like on Instagram, they're like, okay, people don't have an attention span anymore. So you have to create like a 5-second reel
yeah,
and you have to convey your, multifaceted viewpoint in 3 seconds so that everyone can understand it. That's just what people are like these
mm,
days. And as we were saying, like there's always another like end of the spectrum.
yep,
And what that seems to be is Substack, where you can write like 5,000 words and people will read it
yeah,
because they want to. It's like
yes,
so refreshing that those people do still exist. And
yes.
yeah, it's a beautiful place to be. So come and hang out with me there.
I
I'm
am
talking
going
to your
to.
listeners and you.
I'm going to. When that Buckner, I don't remember what his name was, that NFL player that did that commencement speech for that university where he thanked, said that the women are probably looking forward to starting their families. It was like a Catholic
Oh, I missed that.
university. Anyways, I went to do a post on it on Instagram and I started writing in my notes app what I was going to write. And I was like, I can't do this on Instagram. I
Yeah.
actually can't. I've been writing now and it's pages long. And I thought at that point, this was I think back in June. And I was like, at that point, I was like, I need to get a Substack.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'd just done my first episode for the podcast, and I was like, oh God, okay, I've got all these things going on. So I think I will come over there, Aimee.
I
I
would
feel
love.
like your encouragement now has been the confirmation I needed. One day we'll
Yes,
come
come and
over
do
there.
it. Yeah, it's just more wholesome and like real. It's
Yeah,
there's people who are just sharing real stuff. It's not censored.
yeah,
There's different viewpoints. You can find people who genuinely want to read and like learn
yeah,
instead of just like consume. That's the difference.
yeah,
I mean, I like when I think about who I want to read and listen to my stuff, it's people who are like that, like people
yeah,
who are committed to growth and expansion and changing their mind and all
yeah,
of that kind of stuff. And you don't really find a lot of that. People aren't on Instagram for that,
yeah, yeah.
you know?
I noticed that for sure.
So
Okay, well,
let me know when you've created
I
yours
will.
and we
I'm
can team
definitely
up
going to
over
go
it.
check out My Mama Summer over there.
Yay! Please do let me know your faves.
I will. I will. And hopefully we can have you on again at some point. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining me today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I'll speak to you soon.